it's a little awkward. Let's keep that going. As we kind of roll into the panel discussion, I just want to thank you all for being patient, for being a part of tonight, for watching this film, and then kind of witnessing and being our supporters for folks who have been locked up, who are still locked up, and for the folks who are doing their work to set everybody free. On that note, I want to thank a couple people who are here. Folks from California Coalition for Women Prisoners, thank you so much for joining us. Folks from Underground Scholars, thank you for joining us. Folks from Young Women's Freedom Center, thank you for joining us. And of course, thank you to the Asian Prisoner Support Committee for joining us. I want to share with you guys a little bit about who everybody is before we begin with the questions. To start off, I want to tell you what AAPI Women Lead is, actually. So we're an organization that does work to girls. And when we say violence, we mean state violence, structural violence, interpersonal violence, and institutional violence, right? So 3 layers of violence that are intersected. And when we do this work, we do it through story collecting, research, movement building series across the country. And then we host a conference around healing to raise awareness and to do all this work in solidarity with other communities of color. Which then means that this is what our convening is about. It's in solidarity through struggle. So one of our amazing partners is, of course, the great Eddie Jang. Eddie Jang is, and he wanted just a couple of words, so he is the president and founder of the New Breath Foundation, the first philanthropic foundation that started by someone who was formerly incarcerated. He is also part of and former co-director of the Asian Prisoner Support Committee. This is Eddie Jang. We also have K.I., who is a San Francisco native and is still a resident of Frisco. K.I. is the lead organizer at Young Women's Freedom Center. They are a warrior dedicated to fight for justice and healing. We also have Jerry. Jerry Elster holds a master in psychology and is a member of All of Us Are None. Jerry currently works for Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth and works towards a mission of moving restorative justice from the margins to the center of social justice. And then, so good that I have kind of lost the written part of who you are. Daniela Medina is an amazing human being to begin with. She's also one of the Underground Scholars at UC Berkeley. It's all by memory, so if I get this wrong, please forgive me. Who is also a research fellow for the Bright Star Group, and who is also pursuing her master's degree in social work at UC Berkeley. And continues to do work in different organizations that she can tell us about. Okay, so the first question. So again, a round of applause for the first question. And I thank you all for your patience because I have only 2 minutes. So the first question for all of our panelists is, how does your work or personal experience relate to the film?
Question. How do my work relate to what we just saw up here?
Yes, please.
All right. As a former incarcerated person myself, spending 27 years behind bars on a life sentence, I can relate to this because, first of all, I sat on the 5th tier right below the execution chamber while they executed my homeboy Stanley Cookie Williams. My work relate to this because I made a vow that I would never stop fighting for those who were up under those type of conditions, under systemic oppressions and stuff, whether it be male, female, women, transgender, binary, LGBT, any injustice that's done to one of us is done to all of us. The work I do now is moving restorative justice from the peripheral into the center. Because I think that until we find a better system to replace this cruel system that we have operating now, we will continue to be entertaining people from screens like this we just saw.
Excuse me, I'm all in my film. How my personal experience relates to this is I'm also formerly incarcerated. I served 10 years in prison. I spent 3 years fighting a life sentence, so I think that film really hits home, but maybe we'll move on to other things right now. So currently I'm a student at UC Berkeley with Underground Scholars, and without Underground Scholars I wouldn't probably be there without that support. So currently doing a lot of work with Underground Scholars to make sure that other formerly incarcerated people have access to higher education, and that's the work I do there, and also doing work in the community, peer-to-peer support, reentry work with people coming home from prison, and my personal time I spend helping all my friends who are still inside, trying to get out of prison, going to court dates, and just being there for my sisters. All my best friends are in prison. So.
Can I just ask everybody to take a deep breath real quick? One more if you needed to. That film is not easy to watch, and I know hell of us in here is tripping. So that's why I asked that. Could we just take a moment and take a deep breath? Why this, like, for me, this film it doesn't relate in no way. It's embedded in the work I do. It naturally is invested already in me, not just as an organizer, just as a human being. And so what stuck out to me in this film was when he was talking to Johnny D the second time, and he said, I don't know you. Well, tell me about yourself more. I need to know more about you. So when he talked about the story about his grandfather in the black and white TV, and what stuck out to me mainly was he basically was saying, just sitting there waiting for somebody, nobody come for us. So that's why I do this. Not just because I'm formerly incarcerated, but for real, nobody come for us but us.
Well, happy New Breath, everyone. You know, when I read the book Just Mercy the first time, it's the same feeling that I felt when I read The Rape of Nanking by Iris Chan the first time, because my blood was boiling. So, you know, I actually got a call yesterday by my friend Rockman Green, who was an African-American brother who spent years in San Quentin State Prison until he was exonerated for a crime that he never committed. So initially I invited him to come here just to share with us, but he's in Alabama, and I just remember how he never gave up, even though he was framed for a murder that he never committed. Right? So when I read the book, when I saw the film, I just felt that for many of the people who indoctrinated with this anti-blackness sentiment that created some of the many traumas in our community, this has intimate relation to me. And because the institution of racism, the historical enslavement of the African Americans, and the lack of justice for the African American community, for the Native American community, frankly, for many of our people of color community, is something that this film actually just brings to light about the deep-seated injustice that's happening, right? So for the Asian American Pacific Island community, we're impacted by mass incarceration and deportation, but then there's something that we don't really talk about, right, because of the culture shame, and then there's something the mainstream don't talk about. So this film really kind of give us also an opportunity to be able to uplift some of the challenges that we see in that interconnectivity in all people.
So just to kind of be a little transparent about why we chose some of our panelists and the people that we are all supporting, is because as much as we love this film and as much as we are so grateful to Bryan Stevenson, and as much as we want to free all folks who are innocent inside, we also want to make sure that we highlight other folks who are locked up. We also want to make sure that we understand that a lot of women are locked up. We know a lot of people who are gender non-conforming that are locked up. We know that the prison system impacts way more than just those that are inside. There are family members, and then we think about incarceration, how it kind of, there's the parole system, right? Probation. We're thinking about what happens in the schools, right? So all these things are happening, and our folks here are able to give us a testament and an analysis of what that means at multiple levels. So on that note, I ask you the second question, which is, the U.S. carceral institution often creates binaries between the innocent versus the guilty, the violent versus the non-violent, women versus men, the good immigrant versus the bad immigrant. So can you share with us the harms of these binaries and what you think we can do to push back? So on that note, I would love for Eddie and KI to help us.
Listening to that question, for me, automatically I went to other. I thought about the boxes. Have you ever been convicted of a crime? Have you check that off? You have experience in retail, you check that off. Then in my mind, I think in that process of like coming home and like, damn, anxiety, should I lie? Things of that nature, all of that. So my pushback entirely on this question. First, with each other. How do we stop othering each other first? Period. Like, that's where it's going to start in order to get immunity and to really fight the bigger fight of justice and the system that is not broken, that is well machined, that is well oiled, that is running 24/7 to harm our folks, our people.
Well, as someone who is incarcerated since the age of 16 all the way to 37, I grew up in the penal system. After I served my time in the state prisons, I ended up having to be ordered deported to China. And so I spent 2 more years incarcerated. So being locked up for 21 years, I was always an other. And the reason I was an other is because that's how the system is set it up. If you're not black, white, Hispanic, then you're just an other. Right? And then we saw that time and time again in our policies, nationally, internationally, we always get pit against each other. And there's no difference when the modern day slave plantation, right, as part of the prison industrial complex, that's what is by design to separate so they can have control and so they can conquer us. Right? Because they know that if we stuck together, if we're able to understand each other, that we are powerful. Right? So all the separations through words, through labeling, we have to reject that as a collective.
Daniela and Jerry, do you guys want to say something?
I think they did a great job.
really super heavy, you know, but we have like 15 minutes to get so much out. So I just really want to thank our folks for just jumping in and just sharing, so I thank you. And then our last question actually is, given the specific relationship that the criminal justice system has, including prisons, the surveillance systems, policing, and schools, their relationship specifically to Black and Native communities, what does solidarity and support actually look like? Thank you.
I mean, the word solidarity, I think, is simple. It's just, you know, galvanizing and coming together around a central issue or cause to strategically plan something, you know, that's going to resolve that issue equitably, not equality, right? One being that equality is saying, okay, I'm going to give you something that's dated and old because we had this before from a perspective. Equity being, I'm going to give you exactly what it is you need to have to move forward and to bring you up to par. Solidarity is just coming together as a group, looking beyond, across some of those binary things that you were talking about earlier for one another, and looking at that common cause, being able to look beyond Black and white and Latino, and like Eddie said, the other, they try to other all of us, right? Being able to see that common cause, seeing that woman who's suffering in prison, right, because of some dominant male issue that came across, a law that said that doesn't recognize women as equal beings, right? Being able to recognize the other person's struggles in spite of some, I may be sitting a little bit loftier. I saw Kelly Savage speak earlier. People like Kelly Savage should have been out, right? They should have been out. They start getting lifers in male prisons. We start getting dates almost soon as Arnold Schwarzenegger went in. I had to come to work for an organization like Legal Service for Prisoners with Children to learn that women were the growing number of population of prisoners, right? Solidarity means being able to stand in the gap and recognizing my place, right? And supporting them as an ally and not trying to take central stage all the time. So I think solidarity is just being supportive and helping people to reach those results.
I think solidarity looks like elevating the voices of those who are directly impacted by whatever causes we're out here trying to uplift. So that's important to me. But speaking for my community and here in Oakland, I can't, it would be remiss if I just go over this, but Black people are being criminalized here in Oakland every single day. So what you see in this film and everything that you see going on is happening on a daily basis. I was doing direct service work with young Black men, predominantly Black men who were being harassed constantly, and kind of ushered into prison. This stuff is still happening, so you know, I think we need to be very vigilant and watchful of all these policies and measures that are going on here in our community, because people are still going to jail, you know, and people are still fighting cases and not having adequate legal services and basically getting framed. So there's a lot more money that's being invested into the police department than there is into our community. So and they turn around and criminalize Black men, brown men. And also Black women don't feel safe in Oakland because of what's going on too. It has transferred over to now Black women are getting shot. Grandmothers, I've seen grandmothers getting shot. Nobody's even talking about it. So how do we show up? I don't know. We need to step in. I don't think it's at this point about, you know, even talk. I don't know. I don't really have an answer for it, but I know that it needs to be discussed. People need to be talking about it, and people need to be aware and vigilant about what's going on here in Oakland. Anyways.
Well, for me, I went to visit first time with the California Institute for Women in November with a group of funders. And that experience really resonated with me because the women prisoners, the people who are locked up, the mothers, the grandmothers, especially many of the long-term people who are spending life without, triple lives. They're forgotten. They're forgotten inside, and they're treated more inhumane, right? Like, you talk about the good versus the bad or the binary stuff. The women, not only in the prison, are treated badly, they're treated badly out here. This year is the 100-year, the centennial celebration of women's rights to vote. But who's talking about that? Who's uplifting the fact that the woman is still being treated less than the male in every way? So that's why we have to be in solidarity of the people who are marginalized, right? So I always go back to what I said all the time, that we have to tap into our chi. And the chi that I'm talking about is not just the breath and the life force that's sustaining our lives, but the chi that I'm talking about is culture, history, and identity. When we're able to tap into that, that's how we're able to humanize each other. That's how we're going to be able to take action and be in solidarity of each other. Because we don't know where we came from and who we are and what our values are and how our relationship is based and the survival is based on our relationship with each other, then we're lost. And if we don't, because this is fresh on my mind, I just want to say this. If we don't demand reparation for African Americans who've been inflicted or the generational trauma they've been inflicted by this system of oppression, then we are lost. Because if you for a minute to think that the slavery does not impact all of us, then we have failed in our quest for justice. And there is no mercy when justice is denied. There is no mercy. And we can't allow that to happen. So we have to stand in solidarity with each other.
So like I'm in the middle of like OGs and like youth. And so when Eddie was speaking, like it just came to me like, damn, there's a gap in intergenerational relationships. And today's youth, like, they need us. So what does it look like to invest in young folks and like decolonize curriculum and study movements and organize and decolonize research and lead? This is the time to do that. Whether it's policies and bring a whole different shift of the narrative of folks who are marginalized. That's really important to me, take care of our stories. I'm mentored by Kriya Gomez, and she can tell me about my own people, because I don't know, but I'm Samoan descent. And she'd be like, y'all the cousins that came over on the boat. I'm like, we definitely are. Yes, we are. We're all related. And so that's just coming to mind to me, of like, we all related by struggle. And so it's just to echo everybody up here, like, and Jerry, like, all of us are none.
So I think this is amazing stuff that they've also been saying and continue to say. I also want to highlight one of the things that Daniela talked about was what's going on in Oakland, right? So we want to think about what's going on with moms for housing and how that's connected. The prisons, policing, what is the relationship with gentrification and incarceration, right? What are these types of violences that are impacting our communities and which people are mostly impacted? So that's something to think about. And then I hear them talking about like the histories of colonization and imperialism and anti-blackness and chattel slavery. How is it all connected and how does it continue to impact us, and how are we all accountable to one another, because none of that is the same. It's not the same, but how does it relate to each other, and how does it continue to impact us today, right? So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about when I hear them. And then really quickly, I'd actually like to invite Kelly to come back. I tried to text you to tell you this is about to happen. But I'd like to bring Kelly up really quickly. And I want to share what the California Coalition for Women Prisoners actually also, what they do. It's a grassroots social justice organization with members inside and outside of prison that challenges the institutional violence imposed on women, transgender people, and communities of color by the prison industrial complex. We see the struggle for racial and gender justice as central to dismantling the prison industrial complex, and we prioritize the leadership of the people, families, and communities most impacted in building this movement. I wanted to give a moment for Kelly to speak, to answer any of these questions, and I think we may have time for 2 questions. But, folks, we're going to be standing at the door. A couple of our APSC folks will be standing at the door to kind of get you to drop a couple of dollars, 20s, 100, largely because New Breath Foundation said they would drop the same couple of dollars, 20s, and 100s, right? So if you can make sure to pull out what you can, 5 to 10, 20, 100, please make that happen. And I want to pass the mic to Kelly.
No, definitely not.
Been sitting long enough, huh?
Yeah, my leg is killing me from shaking the whole entire time of the movie. So the first thing I want to say, when they talk about the idea of donating today, every single time you think about like what that's going to look like, it's directly going to people incarcerated. Every single time we have a team go to visit, which is, I think, every couple weeks, but there's several teams at both institutions, but we also connect with men and women in every institution. Trust me, they're writing daily. I promise you they're in constant contact. So that support is going to help them as well as we try to give them whatever needs that they're looking for, especially the commutation information and kind of that support directly on what it looks like to write the commutation, as well as how do I work on that remorse. You know, even the men that knew they were innocent felt the heaviness of what that crime was. There is no one that is sitting in a system that says nobody's harmed anywhere. Not only their families, as you saw in the movie and you guys have all talked about, they're hurting both the family members and the incarcerated individual, and most aren't going to tell them what they really go through. I think the hardest part for me was knowing he was going back in that room knowing what his son was about to go through. Mm-hmm. That was the hardest part for me. As a person who had a mother that was incarcerated my whole life, and I did time with, that was her hardest part, was knowing she was incarcerated when I was arrested, when I was sent to prison, and then did time with me. The hardest thing was knowing she was going to go home eventually, each time she got in and out, but I was going to be stuck there. And so that was really hard for her to handle. She couldn't handle that. So would you like to tell me one of the questions? There was a lot, you guys. For me, solidarity is always remembering that I can't do any of this alone. And so I reach out to all the different people. I mean, I'm honored to be on the panel with every single one of them. Of course, Daniela and I, you know, that's family. But at the same time, knowing that every organization that we work with is all finding a way to educate and encourage and lift up the people inside. We don't know that. We truly don't believe that there's people outside. And as women, that silence is so much greater. The visiting rooms are more empty. Not because people don't care for the women, but they're visiting when they can, working between taking care of the children that are left behind. You know, they live at farther distances. It makes it so much harder to have that opportunity. And so the men's institutions, they have support. It's never enough. When you close the door at night, that's when it really hits you. When you don't have anybody to talk to, or you don't know, how to you know, express, my roommate's gonna do the same thing, so how am I gonna tell them how I'm hurting because, you know, I didn't, you know, get a letter for Christmas this year from a loved one, you know? How do I do that to them when I know they're hurting as well, or they're struggling, whatever that fight may be? And so the solidarity is actually taking a moment to think about, did I write someone incarcerated this week, this month? Did I take my time to think about them? Did I send a photo? Yes, some say, well, I visit every few months. They can't hold that when the dark days come and the door's shut. They don't get to hold that. They need that tangible, I want you engaged in my life. And so if you don't write somebody, if you support somebody who does, and some organization that does, that's one more step most don't have, and it would be helpful.
So I think we have, we have time for about 1 or 2 questions. Anybody want to come up? Things you want to say that are kind? Yeah?
So here's my question to the panel. I kind of know the answer for myself, but I think it'd be good for people to hear. As a young black male, many times the whole privatization of the prisons caused people to get into the business of just locking people up, the business of not letting people out on bail, and just the business of having people in jail in an effort to generate money. I know each of your situations is a little bit more different, but can you speak to the audience about how fighting against that big money system versus the good work that you guys is doing needs our financial support to try to bring down that money aspect that they're doing?
I'm gonna say like this, he used the word privatization, right? Y'all know what privatization, everybody know about that, privatization of prisons? We were sending people other states to do time, selling our prisoners off, just like they did the slaves back in the field, sending them one farm to the other farm when the one plantation was doing bad. What's a horrible thing? And that's what we up against, one of the things we up against inside, right? That big dollar thing, we're cattle. If you look at the 13th Amendment, that's the only place you're considered in the United States territory as slave. So in these days, we are still on the books as slaves and free labor inside prison. That's what it's really about. People can tell you a whole lot of other things, but that's what it comes down to. The cold part about it is, though, even out here, you got organizations like CCWP, LSPC, and all these other organizations, they're great organizations, right? Eddie and all, they're doing some great things, but they have to compete against poverty pimps, right? Who are writing these grants and stuff, putting the language in there, but not putting the work in. You know what I'm saying? So we need to be conscious. We need people like yourselves to be supporting this type of cause right here. These are the real people with the foots on the ground. You didn't see CBS and all them out there when you came in, right? You saw the people on the ground who's actually doing the work. So when you talk about the economic thing, drawing the narrative, we gotta shift that. We should be drawing the narrative like the folks are saying up here, right? Those mostly impacted should be leading this movement. OGs like myself, like you just said, OGs like myself, it's time for us to instruct, sit back and let y'all do what you do, right?
So when we talk about private prisons, we still got that in reentry as well. So another way that they're doing that is GEO's taking over. So that's a private prison now taking over reentry. So as you look at ways you can give back, taking the time to find out what groups are working here, how they're getting out. When somebody's getting out, they're sent to a private prison and treated like a prisoner all over again. It doesn't matter if it's, for us, we're looking at, thank God we have somebody supporting us at that moment. And so we're willing to take the crumbs that we didn't even receive in prison when we get out here. but those crumbs are having us in the same exact situation, and the same fear, and the same risk factors that are gonna get us in trouble with parole. Parole is even against some of the ideas, and that says something big. If they're on our side as incarcerated individuals, trying to support us to stop some of the private prisons and how they work. So in all your guys' resources, whatever it may be, hey, I know how to draw, or I know how to plant a garden. Let me see if I can volunteer at one of these reentry homes and give them some education, not just sitting in a group so they can collect money. Because that's what the private prisons out here in the community are doing, is they're just collecting money and leaving us sitting at the programs, seeing the world outside, but we can't go out there. So you guys can bring something in. I know how to, I don't know, make a basket. So let me go teach them something. It's better than them just sitting there doing nothing, hoping that they get to go have a pass in 2 weeks if they make enough group hours.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback off that. It doesn't really have to do with privatization, but about women in general. Like, we live in the Bay Area, so you just see so much. Everybody's, not to be rude, I'm so tired of hearing of San Quentin. I mean, I know it's like right here, and everybody's just going there, and you know it's close by. But I just want to challenge people to really try to go out to, like CCWF, the women's prison. They don't like letting people in. It's so hard to get in there. Underground Scholars, we went for the first time, and saw back where we're from, and saw all the women, and they were just desperate for resource. There's nothing there. It's barren. So I just want to challenge people that when you're doing this work, to please not forget about the women in prisons. Yeah, it's 3 hours away. It's not 30 minutes over the bridge. But just I want to challenge people to please take the time and go out there, because they're desperate. They need help. They need our resources. They need us. They need to feel like they're not forgotten, and that's why Kelly and I are doing this work. So please give them some more money. Thank you.
Is there any other question before so I thought that was a really good question. One of the things that I think is also really important is for us to think, when we think about the prison industrial complex, people have historically emphasized the privatization of prisons, and that's when they start to get like, oh no, that sounds awful. But then we also have to think about the ways that there are so many industries invested in prisons point blank, right? So you want to think about like the different industries. You think about the architecture firms, you think about the food industry that's in there, you think about the prison guards that are in there, you think about the uniforms they wear. All those things, an entire industry built upon incarcerating humans. Industries are built around it. So that's important for us to think and know when we think about the prison industrial complex. It's not just about privatization, which is important. It also means there's a whole bunch of money being made off of keeping people inside, right? So when the answer is you need to give resources, the resource source to get people free, right? So that's really important. And it also means to divest from that. Divest from that. People often think like, okay, what do you do with violent offenders and all that stuff, right? You want to break that binary, but also you want to think about, you need to separate thinking that prisons are actually about doing anything good for anybody. You want to think about what is prison really for before you ask the next question, what are we going to do to replace it? Right? So hold that and think about that as we start to figure out how we're going to break people free, and I'll just keep that real. So on that note, I think there aren't any other questions and words that people want to say. We don't want.
Is this a microphone or?
No, I got it.
First of all, I honor all of you that are here and everyone who is here in this space with us. I appreciate all of it. I'm formerly incarcerated, mass incarceration impacted, all the layers of things. Veteran, so a lot of the things in the movie were really re-traumatizing. But I wanted to bring up how right now in California, the first and new Surgeon General has been a part of shifting the juvenile justice system from the Department of Corrections to, I believe it's possibly public health, yeah. I'm wondering how that can possibly help to fuel other conversations to expand, like where we're going with deconstructing the system. I know obviously that's operating within the system that is already, that we're already dealing with, but I was just wondering if anyone has any thoughts or ideas, or if there's anything happening in harnessing whatever they're trying to do with that, especially because that is what fuels, that school to prison pipeline is what fuels all the industries basically, like creating the numbers for them to justify how much they invest in all of that.
I have some thoughts around that, but I don't necessarily have the answers. For me, at least there's a vision, right? When Governor Newsom decided that to declare that they should put the juvenile justice system in the Department of Public Health, I think that's a good step forward. But when he made that statement, I doubt that he had any realistic plan in place to make that happen. But one realistic plan, a historical plan that he did commit, was making Dr. Nadine Berg, right,
exactly,
the Surgeon General,
right,
to talk about ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, how is that impacting, especially people of color community.
Exactly.
So I think that's a step forward. That's a good plan.
Right.
So sometimes we have to have a vision, right? Just like in San Francisco, the vision is to shut down the Juvenile Justice Center. People say it's not going to work. How are you going to do violent crime? How do you deal with people who commit violent crimes, and where we're going to put them, and where we're going to put the probation officers, and so people are not used to those type of visions,
right,
the ideas, right? So, but the community, the people who are directly impacted, have the solution. So we don't even give that imagination, right, to be bold, to be innovative, right, to find alternatives to incarceration and criminalization. Then we're just going to get stuck with this path of we need prisons, right? We actually don't need prisons.
Right.
So if we don't need prisons, what does that mean? Because we are so used to prison as a way to create public safety. So it may take 100 years, who knows? It may take less than that. But if we don't do something about it, we don't think bold, we have alternatives, then it's never going to happen. Right? So with that, I know we need a close-up, so if Dr. Wun, if you don't mind, I just want to say it again, please support CCWP and other organizations who is doing great work in our community, right? If you can, if you're funders, if you know people who are high network donors, donate to those organizations. And then just talk to your family member, talk to your community, right? We all can do something. It's not always about the money. It's about how do we change our mindset, right? How do we take action? So I want to shout out to Revolve Impact, right, who really create a space for many organizations to have opportunity to fly out theaters, that who are supported by many different foundations, that who wants to utilize Just Mercy as a platform, as a way for us to challenge ourselves, challenge our own ignorance sometimes, and come together, right? And this is what community looks like. The fact that you're here on a Friday night, is a testament that we do have a community that cares, right? And there are many showings that's going to be happening tomorrow in Oakland, in Mountain View, LA, nationally. So we should all do some of that. So lastly, before you exit the door and drop off some of the money that you have, I just want to really thank again Jenny Wun for all the logistics, helping her out, and all the volunteers, the people who created this space. I'm very grateful. All the lawyers out here, all the people on grassroots, you're supporting, fighting anti-deportation. Love you, thank you. Keep doing the great work. And I want to just say, I would love to have you to give us the last word. Because, so we can close out.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. And especially thank you to all the panelists because, and Kelly, I love you. We were in prison together, and I'm so happy to see you free. I've already seen it, but I just really want to thank all the panelists because I know how hard it was to get through that film and then have to come up here and then talk. It's really hard. And for all of my family members, especially my family who went through so much with me and for me, I know it was triggering for everybody, so I love you guys all. Thank you everybody for sharing this space with us.
So we have another story coming out, so we want to mingle and talk outside. That would be awesome. Thank you very much.